It's finally here, performing for you, something something.
Nintendo Switch 2.
We all know by now that this new console has hit the market, and for me, by far the most anticipated title in the launch window was none other than Donkey Kong Bananza. It's been 27 years since the last mainline 3D entry in the Donkey Kong franchise released. I grew up with Donkey Kong 64, but it is considerably older than me. By contrast, I was there on launch day for Donkey Kong Bananza, and since then, I've had my nose buried in it so I could discover every secret hidden in this game's world. There's been a lot of buzz since this title released, but now that some of the hype has died down and everyone's had a little time to sit with their playthroughs, I think I'm finally ready to weigh in. After finally taking Donkey Kong 64 to 100%, I'm now proud to say that I've done the same for the series' latest entry, and I've never been more ready to give you my official take on Donkey Kong Bananza and the Emerald Rush DLC.
Donkey Kong Bananza has zero interest in wasting the player's time, opening immediately with the titular Donkey Kong smashing his way through a solid stone wall before control is handed over completely. You find yourself on Ingot Isle, a mining island rich with a powerful banana-shaped ore known as Banandium Gem, which old DK here has taken a particularly keen interest in. You'll have free reign to explore the colony, at least for a little bit, that is, because well before you're able to eat your fill, an ominous device the size of a small moon descends from the sky and pushes the entirety of Ingot Isle deep underground. Shortly thereafter, DK is tasked with investigating a mysterious object that crash landed on the island following the cave-in, and he soon discovers what appears to be a sentient rock being accosted by insectoid enemies. After saving the rock, the two quickly become friends, and decide to team up to escape the disaster area and return to the surface. They quickly uncover, though, that the only way up may be down, and decide to dive deeper beneath the surface in an attempt to find a way home. It's there they realize the existence of an entire underground world buried deep beneath the planet's crust, and make contact with an ancient Kong elder willing to help them on their journey. The elder ultimately reveals to your character something that was likely spoiled for the player in the trailers, that your Talking Rock companion is in fact not a Talking Rock at all, but rather a child version of Pauline, mayor of New Donk City as of the most recent mainline 3D Mario release, and recurring damsel in distress of the Donkey Kong franchise going back generations. Maybe. The unlikely duo eventually determine that their best chance in achieving their dreams lies at the planet's core, where a powerful object known as the Banandium Root is rumored to grant the deepest wish of anyone who can find it, and as such, resolve to venture ever deeper into the underground world in search of bananas, and ultimately, home. All of this happens within the first hour or two of the game, and as such, I feel like this title makes a very strong first impression. The way the opening is handled gives the player a chance to immediately get hands-on experience with the title's core mechanic, something we're going to be talking about plenty soon enough, and by doing so, it ensures that it has your immediate vote of confidence as it leads you through the first beats of its story. Everything is presented in a very appealing way, which makes it easy to get your teeth sunk in as you explore the opening area. It probably helps, though, that from the second you're given control for the first time, it becomes immediately clear that Donkey Kong Bananza is probably not like anything you've ever played before. So obviously, this title is a 3D collectathon platformer, and it controls about like you would expect. As Donkey Kong, you can run, jump, roll, and attack in a way that feels great, but is ultimately pretty unremarkable in this kind of game. What really sets this entry apart then, is your ability to dig. From the moment you set foot in Ingot Isle, almost everything, and I mean everything, the very world itself around you, is completely malleable and able to be destroyed with a simple punch. By using the face buttons, you can send your fists flying up, down, or forwards, and if there happens to be terrain in the way when you do that, you'll just dig straight through it. Come across a wall blocking your path, you can burrow like a gopher. Need a weapon in a pinch? Just reach down and rip up a piece of the stage geometry to use as a makeshift bludgeon. This is a mechanic that was very obviously designed to be intrinsically enjoyable in and of itself. Everything about the act of digging has clearly been finely tuned to be satisfying, from the amount of damage you cause on impact, to the subtle vibrations of the controller, to the caches of gold and other treasures littered throughout the terrain for you to dig up. This single element, while devilishly simple in concept, is almost enough to carry an entire title on its own, and it's this very ability that you'll be expected to use on your journey to the planet's core. Your primary objective in Donkey Kong Bananza is simply to descend further beneath the planet's crust. As it turns out, deep below Ingot Isles lies an entire underground world split into distinct layers, complete geological marvels featuring distinct ecosystems and inhabitants, many of which show little to no sign of being underground. These layers make up the stages of the game, as you're tasked with traversing their various sub-layers using your digging skills to progress ever downward. Your primary obstacle on this journey will be none other than the dastardly Void Company, a consortium of Kongs responsible responsible for the Ingot Isle cave-in. They're after Banandium gems too, but their harmful mining practices have left the underground's peaceful inhabitants in various stages of disarray, leaving it up to the player to undo the damage and circumvent the roadblocks they've put up to impede your progress. Thankfully though, you'll have more than just digging and parkour on your side, as you'll actually learn from the first Elder that Pauline has an utterly unique ability. She can use her singing to temporarily transform DK into a powerful Bananza form. These brief power-ups give the duo a huge boost in ability. You'll start off with the Kong Bananza, which just makes you a lot stronger, but as you progress, you'll unlock a total of 5 forms, all of which give you one-of-a-kind abilities. The Ostrich Bananza lets you glide and ride air currents, the Zebra Bananza gives you a dash that can help you cross crumbling platforms, the Snake Bananza lets you spring into the air and slow down time, and the Elephant Bananza is the one that you're actually going to want to use for 95% of the game. As you collect Banandium gems, you'll unlock skill points that can be used to upgrade your skill tree RPG style. This is an interesting choice for a collectathon platformer, and I'll give my thoughts on it more a little later, but for now, the important bit is that these skill points can be used to expand the abilities of both Donkey Kong himself and of your Bananzas. This sets up the central gameplay loop of this title. You'll dive into a new layer, spend some time burrowing and screwing around in the new environment, collect some bananas, and do whatever it takes to thwart Voidco's latest scheme, all in service of being able to dive to the next sub-layer, and eventually the next layer, rinse and repeat. Something that I have zero complaints about is the presentation of the layers themselves. This is, of course, the first game that I've played that I count as being a full Switch 2 title, and it absolutely shows in both the visuals and the environment. This is a gorgeous game, with incredibly vibrant colors and textures that are more detailed than anything Nintendo at least has ever produced. I'm such a huge fan of the more cartoony, animated style associated with these types of games, and in my opinion, they benefit just as much from an increase in graphical fidelity as titles that target realism. The amount of variety you're presented with in terms of atmosphere and theming is really admirable. I like that the adventure starts out strong, with very pretty, natural environments that scratch the itch you'll obviously have to see just how good things can look on the new hardware, but it doesn't show everything it has too early either, with arguably the most memorable layer graphically coming later in the runtime. They do a really good job making sure that things never start to feel stale, with areas like the landfill layer and, by far my personal favorite, the feast layer, introducing unique concepts that add a sense of whimsy to the world. So, all of this to say, I was absolutely enamored when I first picked up Donkey Kong Bananza. The digging mechanic alone makes this title utterly unique, and within the first couple of layers, I had it as a shoo-in for Game of the Year. I truly cannot express to you enough the extent to which it's clear just how much development time was put into refining the way you interact with the environment. Just running around the world and destroying terrain is mind-meltingly satisfying, and you could easily have a blast just spending hours doing that. The game is happy to encourage this as well, because there's so much to find while just aimlessly excavating. In addition to the occasional Banandium gem, you'll also find heaps of gold, treasure chests containing things like collectible maps, and some really cool fossils that are unique to each layer and can be traded in to allow for customizing your character. For a while, too, you can kind of just play the game like this. For the first few layers, honestly, you don't really have to pay all that much attention to your intended objective. You can just sort of dig or parkour your way through everything without really giving it that much thought. This is really cool at first, but I think that it also contributed to the slowdown I felt in the midpoint of the game. You see, after the first several layers and a couple dozen play sessions with Bananza, because I was playing it a lot, I started to feel my drive to pick it up every day gradually diminish. It's no secret that it took me an extremely long time to make this video, and while most of that can be attributed to external factors, it is worth mentioning that I spent the vast majority of this time in my playthrough, by volume, situated somewhere in the middle of the story. Unfortunately, I kind of feel like this is one of those titles where the intended campaign progression structure kind of gets in the way of the actual game. This isn't a complaint about the story. I actually rather enjoyed the story, and I think it was really well done. No, I'm talking about progression. This isn't the first time I've experienced this either. I really did not expect to be drawing parallels to Assassin's Creed 2 in this video, but here we are. I spent a long time thinking about this. I knew there was something up that I was noticing, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. It wasn't until I started outlining the script that I finally figured out what it was. So let's think about this. What is the gameplay draw of Donkey Kong Bananza? What is it that we're supposed to find compelling? Well, in other collectathons, that would be collecting. Looking at Donkey Kong 64, for instance, you'll spend most of your time exploring stages and collecting bananas, which you need to unlock the next stage. The main collectible is directly tied to your progression. Frankly, most of the collectibles are, as a matter of fact. The objective of a level is mostly just to explore and collect everything in it, which is how you progress in the game. Other collectathons follow a similar format. In Banjo-Kazooie, you collect jigsaw pieces and music notes because you need them to unlock additional areas. And even looking at a more recent incarnation of the genre, Super Mario Odyssey, the game to which many people consider Bonanza to be a spiritual successor, its primary collectible, Power Moons, are literally how you power your ship that moves you throughout the game world. Following this line of thought led me to a shocking realization. You don't actually need Banandium gems in Donkey Kong Bananza. It's easy to miss because it's the kind of thing you just take for granted in a title like this, but at no point in the game is the primary collectible actually required to progress the story. Banandium gems are new skill points to upgrade your abilities, but none of those abilities are actually necessary to beat the game, and your ability to move on to the next layer is solely tied to completing the various story missions you're given in that stage. Most of these missions reward you with bananas, coincidentally, but those are just nice to haves. It's the act of completing the mission that allows you to access the next area. Even unlocking the various bonanzas are kind of a side beat relative to the main story. You're supposed to need a couple of them at a few points, but some of them are just skippable outright, and all of them are in practice. It's just kind of weird. The game's story missions are fun, I enjoyed playing through them, but structured, mostly linear quests are just not usually the meat and potatoes of an open world collectathon. It leads to this weird dichotomy whereby the gameplay and mechanics that were clearly prioritized in development and intended to be the main draw, or at least from a progression perspective, kind of an afterthought as compared to the story-related content. While the story missions are good and the collectathoning is great, I don't feel like the two integrate particularly well together, and for me at least, that introduced a feeling of dissatisfaction into my playthrough. This probably isn't an issue that everyone will have, but it's definitely something that bothered me as a compulsive perfectionist and completionist. My natural instinct is to completely clear and 100% an area before I move on from it, but obviously, that's not what they intend for you to do, and it's not really viable in a game with this kind of structure. If you just plow straight through the story though, ignoring anything else, that's not really going to be a good experience either. Obviously, you're supposed to explore a little and do some collecting and level up your character, but if you take that approach, then you're just left in the position of arbitrarily deciding when it's time to move on and leave the stage unfinished, which for me is very unsatisfying and makes the prospect of collectathoning much less appealing. I now feel like I have the story looming over me, even if it's something that I would enjoy in isolation, because until it's over, I'm not going to get the opportunity for any closure. I'm obviously somewhere on the spectrum, so I genuinely don't know if this will be relatable to anybody else, but I guess I just prefer my games with a little more structure. I kind of like when they tell me how to play them, and Bonanza really doesn't. What ended up happening though, is after floundering in the mid-game for quite a while, I decided to make a concerted push to finish up the story, and renewing my effort with this fresh mindset, I started to enjoy myself significantly more. Taken in isolation, the actual story of Donkey Kong Bananza isn't really all that expansive. As you descend further towards the planet's core, you'll eventually encounter and subsequently thwart the efforts of Void Co. While your primary beef is with Void Kong, the company's powerful and money-grubbing president, he's joined by Grumpy Kong, the conglomerate's lead manufacturer, and Poppy Kong, the director of intelligence. The writers honestly did a really good job conceptualizing these characters and giving them their own unique characterizations. While Void himself is a pretty one-note, two-dimensional villain, Poppy and Grumpy both have their own values and motivations for being a part of the company. You get a chance to interact with them pretty frequently throughout the campaign, often in the form of hilariously easy but also fast-paced and enjoyable boss fights, and as you do, they become more familiar with your character as well. As you continue to mercilessly beat them, in fact, they actually start to wonder if they might be on the wrong side of history, and eventually abandon Void Co., seeing clearly that their plan is doomed to failure. This only ends up making Void more determined though. There's actually a pretty memorable section where you have to team up with Poppy Kong because Void got you both thrown in rock prison. In the end though, it doesn't end up mattering, because, and this is your only spoiler warning, while you beat him to the core, he backs you into a metaphorical corner, forcing Pauline to use her singing powers to save DK, but in doing so, give him control of the Banandium route. Or so he thinks at least. What actually happens is he gets fisted into the sun by King K. Rool, in a shocking twist that took the internet by storm. This is genuinely a really cool moment. Void made for a super compelling antagonist, but the nanosecond K. Rool shows up on screen, he instantly becomes the star of the show. Man has aura as he dives down towards the true planet's core, and the actual fight for the Banandium root begins. The face-off against the Kremlin King is some real fan service. It's a brilliantly designed sequence, complete with a fake-out in-credits reel before K. Rool takes over New Donk City, and you have no choice but to battle your way through it before you can take on the final showdown. In the end though, our duo emerges victorious, and we're treated to a genuinely heartfelt conclusion. I know that full voice acting has been standard in the industry for decades now, so I fully acknowledge that the frankly bizarre decision to afford a voice role to exclusively Pauline and nobody else is very much a go Nintendo give us nothing. That said though, Ginny Kid delivers a solid performance, and at the very least having arguably the focal character get voice lines does wonders for allowing you to get emotionally invested in their story. The segment at the end, where Pauline ultimately realizes that DK would be happiest continuing his adventures without her, is a really bittersweet moment, and it's memorably well done. It's also where we wrap up Donkey Kong Bananza. That is, of course, if you're just looking to finish the main story. For me, there's still plenty to do. The postgame does include a brief time skip, but it also doesn't waste time pairing you back up with Pauline, and with her powers back at your disposal once again, you're free to continue exploring the underground world. Finally, I'm left to collect uninhibited. So what exactly are we looking for? Well, the biggest thing is obviously that we'll want to collect all 777 Banandium gems spread across the title's 17 layers and 44 total sub-layers. Additionally, we'll need to be on the lookout for fossils. Not every layer has them, but those that do typically have either 30 or 72 depending on their size. We'll need these to fill out the fossil museum in the Groove layer, but also so we can unlock every outfit. This might sound kind of overwhelming at first, and it is a lot to try and find. In particular, I was a little worried about the fossils on account of the fact that there are so many of them per level, and there didn't seem to be any way to keep track of which ones you had already collected. Thankfully though, with a little trial and error, I was able to discover a workflow that made quick work of this process, and I now consider myself an expert paleontology Kong. The trick is just the elephant bonanza. Yeah, I know I haven't spoken about any of the bonanzas in depth at this point, but the elephant bonanza is OP. Rather than relying on its fists, it's able to suck up terrain with its trunk, which is already insane because it means you can mine things you wouldn't ordinarily be able to touch, like thorns or lava. That's just the tip of the iceberg though, because with a couple of skill point upgrades, the elephant becomes a walking natural disaster. Think about it this way. If fully upgraded DK is a diamond pickaxe, and the fully upgraded Kong Bonanza is a diamond pickaxe with efficiency 5, the Elephant Bonanza is Instamine with a haste 2 beacon. It allows you to just world edit your way through stages, and as I mentioned previously, when mining, you have a chance to find treasure chests, one of the drops of which is a map revealing the location of a fossil in that layer. If you pair this with a fully upgraded treasure tie, which you can buy in the Lagoon layer and which ups the spawn rate of chests, you'll have an extremely powerful build on your hands. Find a good place to just level out in your layer of choice and turn your brain off while endorphins rush in. A decent session of that, and you'll have the location of every fossil you're missing marked conveniently on the map. This is a little time consuming and a little brain numbing, admittedly, so it probably won't massively appeal to everybody. But for me, it's exactly the kind of thing I'm into. I love terraforming in Minecraft, I love playing Power Wash Simulator, and I love leveling mountains in Donkey Kong Bananza. Throughout the process, you'll also find banana maps, and these do pretty much what you'd expect. The same thing as the fossil maps, but with bananas. These are nice, but they're an order of magnitude rarer than their contemporary, and as such, can't really be relied on when it's time to go banana hunting. Thankfully though, in this case, the game provides a pretty convenient checklist of every banana grouped by stage, so keeping track of them is much more manageable. Realistically, you'll probably just want to follow a guide for these, but even if you do, the process of collecting them is really enjoyable. It gives you a chance to properly explore the worlds that you might not have gotten during the story, or even during your more map-focused paleontology rotations, which I think is what really started to scratch that collectathoning itch, at least for me. Between the gems scattered across the sub-layers, the fight arenas, and the selection of bonus stages you'll need to complete, hunting down the Banandium gems, while still being a relaxing, relatively straightforward process, provides a much more varied gameplay experience that I really appreciated between long sessions of fossil collecting. If I had to levy a complaint, it would probably just have to be that the checklists are really long, and every time you open the menu, it starts you back at the top again, which sounds silly, but it's a real pace breaker having to find your spot again every time. For most layers, this will be pretty much everything you have to do when it comes to 100%, and if that was where we left off, I would have been more than satisfied with my experience. That's not all though, because Donkey Kong Bananza actually has a pretty admirable selection of post-game content you'll need to conquer if you want to complete everything. Mainly, I'm talking about the Elder Rehearsals. You see, the main reason Pauline came back here in the first place is to find inspiration for a new song, and in order to do this, you'll have to visit each of the 5 elders and complete their rehearsals. In order to even unlock these, you'll need to collect a certain number of bananas, up to 600, which is appreciated, seeing as how the base game requires that you collect, 0 bananas to complete it. The rehearsals themselves, though, are actually a pretty interesting concept. They're basically challenge courses that you'll have to complete using only the corresponding Bananza, and they're intended to require you master every facet of that Bananza's abilities. I honestly really appreciate this. Something I really enjoyed about the base game is the fact that it kind of lets you figure out your own approach to solving puzzles, which is awesome because it gives you an unparalleled amount of freedom and opportunity for creativity. The downside, though, is that since the game is usually pretty easy, most of the time you can figure out a brute force solution to a problem, and as such, at least in my playthrough, some of the more specific abilities tended to go underutilized. These rehearsals are genuinely somewhat challenging, at least compared to the rest of the game, and I think it's awesome to give accomplished players something a little more difficult to chew on and show off their skills. They reward you with quite a few Banandium gems, which you'll obviously need for 100%, but in addition, they unlock a new secret golden ability for their respective Bananza. These just make you generate gold when you use them, which isn't all that revolutionary, but it's a nice trophy that I appreciated having the opportunity to collect. Back on Ingot Isle, you'll also discover that Grumpy Kong and Poppy Kong have reunited and started a construction business, hoping, I suppose, to undo some of the damage they caused working for Void. By paying Grumpy a fat stack of gold, you can unlock a couple of challenge gauntlets, and once again, you'll need to complete them for bananas. Seeing as how one of them is timed, I actually found them quite difficult, with the Battle Rush in particular requiring you to complete 13 consecutive waves without falter. Ultimately though, this felt like an absolutely worthy endgame challenge, and I had a lot of fun working my way through them. You'll need to do everything mentioned above if you want all 777 unique Banandium gems, which, when accounting for banana bunches, will bring your total to 929 unique bananas for the purpose of skill points. If you want to max out your skill tree though, you're going to need an even 1,000, which means buying 71 total additional bananas from the chip exchange. This is what chips are for. I didn't mention them previously because this is all that they do. You can buy bananas. 14 initially, one for each layer with a chip exchange, and then another 71 to bring you up to 1,000. Even after 100% completing the entire rest of the game though, I still only had about half the chips I needed, so I ended up having to equip the chip doubling tie and spend an hour or so farming this battle challenge to get everything that I needed. Admittedly, this feels a little silly and more than a bit clunky, but it's so small in the scale of the larger game that I will say I found it almost a little charming. Assuming you found all of the random enemy drop music discs by this point, which to be clear, you definitely will have, with every fossil from every layer in hand, every outfit purchased, and 1,000 total Banandium gems all eaten and accounted for, you have officially 100% completed Donkey Kong Bananza. This is no small feat, and reaching it awards you with a total of 3 stars on your save profile, indicating that you've done everything there possibly is to do. As one final reward, revisiting the Banandium route will present you with one last scene. Pauline, on stage, performing in New Donk City with Donkey Kong and all of the friends you made along the way, cheering her on in the audience. It took me about 80 hours to get to this point, making this my longest completion for the channel so far, and I have to say, I don't regret any of it. Donkey Kong Bananza was an amazing experience, and while I still maintain its imperfection, I absolutely did feel it drag a little in the midpoint of the story. It was not a 10 out of 10 throughout. I enjoyed my time in the post-game, which easily takes as long if not longer than the main campaign to finish, so much that it's hard for me to give any serious notes. Even still, many months later, Donkey Kong Bananza is the Nintendo Switch 2's killer app. It feels like a next generation title. At least for the red team. You need to play it, and I sincerely hope that the love it's gotten shows Nintendo that there is still a lot of interest in not only this franchise, but in this type of game in general.
And that's where I would leave it. And it would all be perfect. But then, Nintendo, in their infinite wisdom, in honor of their pact with Satan, made a decision. They would release a $20 DLC for a $70 game that had released not even 2 months ago. I'm gonna talk about it. You can check the length of the video. I had to buy it. What choice did I have? $70 on a video game is already like a once every couple of years type expenditure for me, frankly. Spending double digits on a game in a single sitting feels like sacrificing a piece of my soul. And as such, You can imagine the now $90 asking price for all of this game's content is the kind of greed that very explicitly ensures you will never see the light of heaven. Look forward to that, Nintendo.
That said though, I bought it. So what did I pay for? Well, for starters, you get access to a new layer, DK Isle, a modernized amalgamation of Donkey Kong's homeland as it's been represented in a variety of previous titles. This is really cool. As someone who just played Donkey Kong 64, this is a really nice thing to have. It's not a real layer, there aren't any fossils or Banandium gems or anything, it's basically just a bit of fan service, but there's really nothing wrong with that. Much has already been said about the hilariously tone-deaf decision to include this as part of a paid DLC instead of the base game, and I'm not going to relitigate that. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter because it's not the main focus of this add-on. No, the real value add, supposedly, is the titular Emerald Rush mode. After being unceremoniously sent into orbit by a lizard and abandoned by his underlings, the dastardly Void Kong has abandoned his search for Banandium Gem and has instead made his way to DK Isle in search of Banandium Gem, but apparently before it's fully ripened, which makes it green, like an emerald. So it's synonymously referred to as Emerald, even though it isn't actually Emerald, and apparently Emerald is also a real separate thing that exists in universe. It's kind of weird. Void wants to collect this newly discovered resource, but he doesn't know how to do anything himself, which means
you are now one of my elite employees!
Emerald Rush is essentially an entirely separate mode you can access whenever you see fit. As now acting members of Voidco, it will be your job to journey out to existing maps and collect as much Emerald ore as possible within a time limit. The catch is, before you can head out on a mission, Void removes all of your skill tree upgrades, meaning if you want to use them to boost your productivity, you're going to have to earn them back. This is basically a pseudo-roguelite. All collectibles have been put back in their original places, and by collecting them, you'll get to choose between 3 different randomly selected perks that last for the duration of the rush. These, naturally, mostly serve to increase the amount of emeralds you collect after, say, beating a specific kind of enemy, killing an enemy in a certain way, or opening a treasure chest. Rather than operating on a global timer, each rush is instead split into a number of discrete rounds, each lasting 100 seconds. Before each round, you'll be given a set emerald quota you have to meet to progress to the next one, and this quota will increase by a set factor each round until you either finish the rush or fail to meet a requirement. To help you with this, Void will also give you a set goal which can be done at any time, rewarding you with chips and emeralds. These goals are also random and spawn randomly across the map, but depending on the layer, they may be crucial to your success. I am not, as a general rule, a huge fan at the conceptual level of DLC or other post-game content that removes all of your power-ups and abilities from the base game. It feels like a bit of a cop-out to me, generally, and it can be kind of frustrating, especially when you're expected to grind them out a second time. Beyond that though, Emerald Rush is a perfectly cromulent mode. I will say that it's clear just by playing it that it was not just an afterthought intended as a cheap cash grab. I mean, it's a cheap cash grab, but it definitely had some development time. Primarily, the dominant strategy is to try to chain together as many intercompatible perks as possible, and if you do this successfully, you can stack massive multipliers on particular actions that are absolutely necessary if you want to survive the higher difficulties. As you successfully complete more rushes, you'll gradually unlock new perks that can appear in-game, as well as new stages you can perform rushes in. And again, I am happy to say that there was clearly a decent amount of thought put into how existing stages could be made to mesh well with this mode. You will also unlock progressively higher difficulties ranging from 1 to 7, with 1 being the easiest and 7 being the hardest. As you go up in difficulty, not only does the quota multiplier increase significantly, but you also start your rush with fewer resources, like the consumable warp barrels you need to teleport. This is where my primary issue with this DLC comes into play. You see, when you complete a rush on a given level, that level is marked with a medal corresponding to how many of the 7 difficulties you completed in that stage. The highest here is the Emerald Medal for completing every difficulty. So naturally, if you want to 100% complete Emerald Rush, you'll need to collect an Emerald Medal in every stage. The problem that arises here though, is that unlike in any sane game wherein a reward like this would typically be distributed based on the highest difficulty level you've completed, with completing the highest difficulty also giving you credit for every easier difficulty below it, that is not how it works in Emerald Rush. No, in Emerald Rush, you have to complete each difficulty level individually, all 7 difficulty levels, in every stage. Now this, even, while annoying, wouldn't be the end of the world in and of itself. No, In fact, I feel like this actually creates a pretty compelling progression structure for tackling each layer. Difficulty level 7 can genuinely be quite hard. At the very least, it isn't the kind of thing you can just dive straight into and expect to get on your first try. You need to familiarize yourself with the layout of the layer, where all the fossils are, where goals tend to spawn, how to route fossils on bananas, etc. Starting with the lower difficulties and gradually ramping up actually provides a pretty great way to do this, keeping you engaged while you gather experience, while also making sure you never feel like you're wasting your time on potentially failed attempts. Most layers, though, are not 7 increments of difficulty hard. This level of preparation might be justified for Hilltop Layer, which is by far the most challenging because you're completely reliant on void goals to provide enemy spawns, and there are a couple of other stages that might take a few tries to master. But once you get below like the top 3, you should just be good to dive in at like difficulty 6, and you'll be able to take it on no problem. Even all of that wouldn't be that big of a deal though, so you have to play through a few extra rushes, who cares? But what you're not considering is that completing an expedition in Emerald Rush takes a set amount of time. I already mentioned that each round lasts 100 seconds, but that's 100 seconds regardless of whether you've already hit your quota or not. No matter what you do or how far ahead you may be, you still have to wait for every round to play out its full timer, and by the time you get to the higher difficulties, a single rush lasts 15 rounds. Doing the math, that means that a 15-round expedition will always, inherently, take at minimum 25 minutes to complete. And there are 3 15-round difficulty levels per layer. Let's just work this all out, actually. So there are 11 playable layers, and for each one you have to complete 7 difficulty levels, 1 with 6 rounds, 3 with 10 rounds, and 3 with 15 rounds, for a total of 81 minimum rounds per layer, assuming you beat them all on your first try. So, multiply that by 11 layers, and you get 891 total rounds you have to play in order to get all of the emerald medals. Now all we have to do is multiply that by 100 seconds per round, and we'll see that with absolute, hypothetical, perfect gameplay, the absolute fastest you could 100% complete the Emerald Rush DLC is 24 hours and 45 minutes. Even that, though, is nowhere near the actual number, because, well, first of all, it assumes you beat every difficulty on your first try, which you won't, but also, it doesn't account for the time you'll spend selecting perks, or in loading screens between warps, or talking to Void, all of which pause the round timer. I am describing tens of hours of menial, zero-stakes gameplay in baby-level difficulties, all at the behest of a countdown clock. I have done some ridiculous things in games before, many of which no reasonable player would ever consider worthwhile. So I really want you to understand that I don't take this lightly when I say that this is the biggest waste of my time I feel I have ever subjectively experienced in a video game. This DLC gave me genuine existential thoughts about my own life. It almost got me to break character. That is not good. And it's not even that I didn't have any fun, because it can be a really engaging mode. The rushes themselves are clearly very well made and thought through, but the progression structure is nonsense, and I couldn't be happier that I'm never going to have to do this again. Back on DK Isle, a few last surprises are waiting for you. By speaking to Squawks the Parrot, you can exchange a few chips, yet chips get another use, for a lifelike statue of a character from the game to decorate your island. These statues are really high quality, and I genuinely really appreciate this kind of thing. I'm really glad it was included. I will say though, that even though by this point I had plenty of chips from Emerald Rush to buy everything, in order to actually do so, and I timed this, I used a turbo controller to ensure maximum efficiency, you have to talk to Squawks and watch the statue delivery animation for a little over 13 consecutive minutes. Why, Nintendo? Speaking to Void one last time will actually give us the chance to knock the brakes off him again, if we want to, which is honestly pretty cathartic at this point. And finally, with the last of our aggression out of our systems, we're treated to an interactive sunset credit sequence on DK Isle, an appropriately ceremonious end to my most expansive journey yet, at least until rent is due later this month and they release a $40 DLC and I have to play for another banillion hours. All said and done, I spent about 110 hours in Donkey Kong Bananza, although some technical issues meant that I had to spend a ton more time re-recording footage, so I'm almost up to 160 now. I'm serious. This was an experience that I am sure I will never forget, and that I also know that I don't want to. I'm tired, I will be honest, and I am very ready to be done, but all said, I still had a really good time with Donkey Kong Bananza. My opinion on the base game is unchanged, and while my time with the DLC was troubled to say the least, a weight has truly been lifted off of me by adding this whole thing to my list of 100% completed games. DK and I might need to take a little break, but all of this has me truly optimistic about the life of the Nintendo Switch 2, and I couldn't be more excited to see what's next for this franchise and for the future of Donkey Kong.
We're breaking through, down to the core. No stopping us, not anymore. Inside the storm, I found the key. Your beat rang out, my voice has been released. You and me, my hand in your hand. This melody in harmony will strike a chord that's gonna break us free.
And just like that, it's finished. This video truly has, in one form or another, been almost a year in the making, and having it finally out almost feels like the end of an era. I'm excited though for what's to come. Stay tuned. If you're still watching at this point, you're honestly more of a trooper than I am. I really appreciate you. All I ask is that if you did enjoy, leave a like, get subscribed, and maybe leave a comment letting me know what you thought about Donkey Kong Bananza. This is obviously a topic that I'm very passionate about, so I'd love to hear from you and see all of your spicy takes in the comments. Lastly, before I go, remember that you can always find all of my social media linked down in the description below, along with any of the music that I used in this video. I need some time to decompress, so I'll see you in the next one. And as always, thanks for watching.